You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air, the podcast where we delve into the world of technology transfer and innovation. I'm your host, Lisa Mueller, and today we have an intriguing topic to explore: spinning out biotechs, how timing is everything. Spinning out from academic institutions has always been an exciting prospect for researchers and entrepreneurs, but determining the right time to take the leap can be a challenging decision. Today, we'll be discussing the critical factors that influence the decision to spin out or incubate groundbreaking technologies. We'll also dive into the world of academic therapeutic product development and learn about the strategies used to overcome the valley of death and bring valuable intellectual property to market. Please join me in welcoming our guest today, Irene Abrams, the Vice President of Technology Development and New Ventures at Boston Children's Hospital. Irene leads the Technology and Innovation Development Office, which is responsible for commercializing discoveries and innovations developed by researchers and clinicians at the hospital. She's also the Managing Director of the Technology Development Fund. With her extensive experience at various institutions like Partners Healthcare Innovation, Brandeis University, and MIT, Irene brings a wealth of knowledge and insights into the world of technology transfer. Welcome, Irene. I'm so excited to have you here on the air.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too, and we have a lot to talk about because our topic today is spinning out biotechs. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So, Irene, building meaningful intellectual property is crucial for successful technology transfer. Can you talk about some of the strategies you employ to identify and potentially protect valuable IP in the early stages of technology development?
Yeah, thank you. That's a terrific question. And I think what is so important about it is that it really identifies IP as being the key to technology transfer. And certainly at Boston Children's, we use all the usual techniques that people do. You know, we file patents, we get to know our faculty early, we do a lot of sponsored research. But we also really seek to add value early for a lot of our technologies, because what we've really seen, and I've really seen over the course of my career, is that while innovation at academic institutions, particularly in the life sciences, really drives the biotech and pharma industry, and so much discovery comes from innovations first identified in academic institutions. And if you think about things like CAR T and gene therapy and mRNA and vaccines and so forth, that all originated from academic institutions. But at the same time, over the last 20 years or so, patent law has changed in ways that make it harder to protect biological discoveries as opposed to therapeutic compounds. And so a lot of academic institutions, and this has been a focus of a lot of what we've done at Children's, have been thinking about how to not just protect early innovation, but maybe even advance the technologies a little bit further. So in addition to having a really meaningful discovery, you also might have meaningful intellectual property. So we spend a lot of time trying to advance promising technologies so that we have the chance of owning some of the meaningful IP. So if you think, I've been in this field my whole career. So I'll say, back in the day, it was easy to get a patent on a target. Pharma companies were more than happy to pay what we called in those days reach-through royalties, saying anything that they discover that up or down regulates your target, they'll pay you on. And that certainly has changed over time quite significantly. And now it's really quite difficult to get value for biology without having an actual therapeutic compound, at least a little bit identified. And so we do spend a lot of time thinking about incubation and how to advance our technologies. So we both do all of the usual things that tech transfer offices do, and we love when technologies come across the door that are valuable already. But a lot of times we really have to think about how to advance them. And so we have both internal funding programs, and we have a lot of strategic partnerships with industry that are focused on co-development of technologies. And so this is something I think about a lot in my career and in the work that we do at Children's.
Now, I want to go back to something that you alluded to, and that was incubation, because timing really plays a crucial role in this process. Can you share some insights into when it's best to spin out a technology versus maybe incubating it further within an academic institution? And also, along those same lines, what are some key indicators or milestones that might signal when it's ready to move forward? And how do you assess the potential for commercial success?
Yeah. I have to say, tech transfer is still more of an art than a science. And so each situation is a little individual, and you really have to think carefully. And there are a lot of elements that go into deciding whether to spin something out. A lot of times, we don't have a lot of potential partners at the table. And if you do have a promising partner and the faculty member is really excited about it, a lot of the times we'll go forward because, in that sense, you have an opportunity, and you don't want to miss out on that opportunity on the hopes of maybe having a future opportunity. On the other hand, sometimes a technology will come to us that we know has a lot of potential, but it's not really quite ready. And a lot of times folks in the industry will say, gee, if we had a little more de-risking and a little more confidence, then we would be ready to move forward. And so there are cases where we will look at something and decide, it would be really great to incubate it a little bit further in the hopes that we can get closer to a value inflection milestone. But a lot of times, it depends on the IP, the state of the IP when it comes across our desks, the market interest. We respond a lot to market pull. We have to, and the interest of the investigator and kind of where they are as well. So it's not a perfect science by any means. I think, when you look at the data in the life sciences in academic licensing, a key inflection point for value is really 2 years before an IND. So if you look at deals, often that's when, if you're close to IND, where you get a higher value. But it's tough to get there as an academic institution. Usually we have things that are much earlier than that. And it's quite expensive to drive them all the way to IND ready. So we do a lot of early deals, and some of our early deals, we'll take an equity stake in a spin-out company, and often they don't turn into royalty-bearing deals because either our IP was so early that it didn't cover the ultimate product, our patent didn't issue the way we hoped it would, or the company pivoted and didn't in the end use our IP. But you get to hold on to the equity, and often there's a lot of dilution, but sometimes we've done pretty well on that. So it's not a perfect science, and we're pretty opportunistic, but I believe very strongly that all of the work that we do in academic technology transfer, it starts with the creativity of the faculty and the researchers. And so we also work closely to align with our researchers and to really understand, what their hopes and dreams are for their life's work, and what and its expression in the commercial realm, if that's a direction that they hope to go. And so we weigh all of these different variables: the IP, the market pull, the faculty interest, what we think the potential is. And that's sort of, we put it together and try to find a path forward.
So Irene, as you well know, risk assessment is a crucial aspect of the tech transfer process. And often, people and others in the field, you have to make really tough decisions. Can you share some of your experiences or examples where you had to evaluate and mitigate the risks associated with spinning out or incubating a technology, especially when the market demand may not have been fully evident at the time? And if you could tell us a little bit about how you approach such challenges.
Yeah, this is one of the really hard things about the work we're in is that, we work with scientists who are at the cutting edge of their fields. Often they're ahead of their time, and the market isn't always ready for them, and industry doesn't always recognize where things are going. So, for example, a lot of times people will ask, "Well, what's the can you do some market research on that invention?" And I'll say, well, there is no market, right? I mean, this is like if this works, it's a new market. So you have to think about and weigh a lot of different things. So I'll give an example, and I'll talk a little bit about the process too. So we do have examples where we've invested in technologies where it wasn't really clear if they were going to make it over the line into commercial hands, but we believed enough that if we could de-risk them, we would at least have a chance of getting an outside party to invest in it. So one of them was a technology that came from our anesthesia department, and it's a long-acting local anesthetic. And so it's used both for surgical anesthesia and for post-surgical pain, and it lasts 24 or 36 hours post-surgery. So the idea is that it both serves as the anesthetic during surgery, but then also avoids opioids and post-surgical complications. So very valuable, very interesting. We had animal data, but we had no human data. And there was a lot of interest in the market, but nobody was really ready to commit. And in that case, because we believed in the product ourselves, and because we had the support of the chief of the anesthesia department, we co-invested in funding the phase 1 clinical trial. So there was an investigator-initiated clinical trial at Children's. And after that, once we got that early human data, we were able to license it to a pharma company. And that sort of overcame the risk in that case. Other times, we funded things that were much earlier, much further from human trials, but that de-risked the projects enough so that we were able to get a commercial party to invest. So the way we think about this is, we have our expertise within the office, our tech transfer expertise and many years of experience with early stage commercial development. But we also have a number of industry advisors for our office, outside experts who help us make the decisions about investing in technology development. And that's really helpful because they are number one. I mean, they're very, very dedicated to Children's Hospital and very generous with their time, but they are, cold-hearted business people. And so they generally look at things with a more critical eye.
Yeah, they're going to call it like they see it type of thing.
Yeah, and they're less likely to be influenced by the politics of the institution.
I was going to say less diplomatic.
Exactly, less diplomatic, and also less. They don't have to live at the institution with the same people over and over again. So it's a little easier for them to be critical, and it also partly takes the burden off the tech transfer office and gets you out of that middle ground, which is really helpful politically as you invest in projects, because you can't invest in everyone, right? And so we do rely on outside experts. We rely on external advisors. And then we also have built up over time a really talented internal team, people from industry, people who have done drug development in industry, to help guide us around these projects too. So we try to do a combination of our own internal evaluation, our understanding of the IP, our understanding of the faculty member and their interests, and then and look to experts outside to validate and then our own internal team. So that's how we do it. The hard part is when you turn people down. It's always painful, and there's no way to fund everybody, even if they have a terrific project and we believe in it. We just know we have limited resources. But we've had a lot of success in funding. The example I gave you was of a phase 1 clinical trial, which is pretty advanced. But we also have examples of funding early toxicology, early lead development, even compound screening that has helped push projects to a point where a third party will invest.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about another area that I know academic institutions struggle with, and that has to do with retaining and incentivizing their researchers, particularly during the spin-out process. How do you address those challenges and ensure that your researchers remain engaged and committed to the tech transfer process?
At Children's Hospital, our faculty are all Harvard Medical School faculty. That's where their academic appointment is. And as a Harvard faculty member, they're allowed to consult 20% of their time on outside projects. This is not uncommon in the Boston area. MIT has the same rule. And so faculty can start companies and spin out technology and keep their hospital appointment as long as it's limited to this 20% time. We do have a very involved conflict of interest process at Children's Hospital, so we can manage conflicts of interest. Very important, particularly in academic medical centers where there's patient care and there could be patient involvement. So we have a very active COI process that all the faculty have to go through. But they are allowed to start companies. They're allowed to be founders. They're allowed to take founders equity and keep the upside of their founders equity. So that's usually a pretty nice incentive.
Definitely.
And then they also get a share of any revenue we bring in, whether it's through equity, cash out, royalties, milestones. At Children's Hospital, the inventors share about 30% of what we receive, and their lab gets another cut and their department gets another cut. So all in, it's almost half of what we bring in goes back to the inventor or the inventor's academic department or lab. And so that's also pretty incentivizing to folks. So we have not had a lot of trouble keeping people engaged in the process, but we also generally we don't go ahead with a startup company unless the faculty member is really invested, because it takes so much of their time. And if they really just want someone else to take it and run with it and they just want to go back to the lab, I would encourage them to think about licensing it to an existing company, because if they want to start a company, they've got to be out there raising money. They've got to be out there going to board meetings. They have to sit on the SAB. It's going to take a lot of their time and a lot of their energy. Years ago, when I was at MIT, I used to call it a post-tenure activity, because people could not start companies before they had tenure, and then they got tenure, and they're like, "Oh, what are we going to do now?" But a lot of more young faculty members start companies now and figure out a way. But that's how we retain and incentivize. And I think actually, if we didn't have an active tech transfer office and we weren't encouraging of faculty innovation, we'd have a harder time retaining faculty in the Boston area, because they expect it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Given, like you said, in Boston, there's a lot of places that they could go and receive those incentives. So that makes a lot of sense. So, Irene, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you about venture capital firms and biopharma companies, because obviously collaborating with them from the tech transfer perspective is very complex. Can you talk a little bit about how you establish mutually beneficial partnerships, and what are the key elements that contribute to successful alliances?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think it's important to remember when you enter into these relationships that they are really long-term relationships. Patents, obviously, 20, 21 years. The product development cycle for a therapeutic, 8, 10, 12 or more years. They're very long-term relationships. And so I think it's important to structure it so that to the best of your ability, incentives are aligned. And so, when you have a good, strong patent, that's pretty easy. The company wants your patent. You want your patent. That works out fairly well. But you want to, you need to structure it so that there's room to share success, but you're not so, I'll just say, maybe so aggressive as to suppress the ability for the technology to go forward. So that's, that you have to be a little careful about that. I've mentioned faculty a lot. You really need faculty buy-in. I don't think there is a lot of successful technology transfer where the faculty member isn't involved. And that's true for pharma and biopharma companies as well, because so much comes up in the course of early stage development, especially in those early years, whether it's scientific, whether it's regulatory, whether it's, going over there to give them advice, and help them think through the design of the research, whether it's sharing assays. So making sure the faculty are bought into the relationship, setting up as many mutually aligned aspects to the agreement, and to the best of your ability to build trust. It's not perfect, and I think I'm going to sound like the old person, the old cranky person on the corner. But back in the old days, people stayed in their jobs longer, right? So there's also the fact that there's a lot of turnover.
Yeah,
so you might have a really great relationship with the person across the table, but they're not going to be the person across the table for the whole relationship. And then the other thing to think about is, even if you have a great relationship with somebody in a startup company, if they're successful, they're not going to be the person sitting across the table writing you a check someday when the product hits the market, right? That's going to go to, they're going to be acquired, hopefully, or they'll license off the technology. So you also have to structure the agreement so that it's not only based on trust and friendship, but also has some good definitions in there that will protect you and your institution when if they are successful. I don't know if this data point is still accurate because it's kind of old, but back when I was at MIT, we did a study of exclusive license agreements, and it turned out 50% of them were amended within the first 4 years.
I think I've seen similar stats to that very recently. I don't think it's changed too much.
Yeah, I agree with you. So it's in both parties' interests to have a good relationship, not only the academic institution, because the pharma company or the spin out's going to come back to you either because, they want to sub-license something and the sub-licensee doesn't like the terms and they want you to be flexible, or, you have some new IP. There are always things you have to work out. So you have to think of it really as a very long-term relationship, not as a sale. And that, is really the best you can do. The other thing I would say is that, and this is true on both sides of the table for the industry folks and for the folks in academia, is that it also helps a lot to have people with experience, because I think a lot of times the issues that you face they're complex and they're nuanced, and if either party isn't really comfortable or hasn't had a lot of experience with the issues, it's very hard to build that trusting relationship, because people don't always know what the consequences of their decisions are. So I think it's also important to, on our side of the table, train people really well and mentor staff and help people really grow and learn and understand, you're negotiating this contract, but what does it really mean? And how do you really think about it over time? And that's helpful, of course, on the other side too.
Now, I wanted to switch gears again, Irene, because when I talk to people in tech transfer offices on this podcast, I often ask them about challenges they face. And one of them is resource constraints. Can you talk a little bit about how you allocate resources effectively to support multiple technologies, as I know you're doing, in various different stages of development, especially when you have some, like you mentioned earlier, that need further incubation?
Yeah, so I would say we've been really lucky at Children's Hospital. Children's is a very entrepreneurial organization, and they've been really supportive of our office and supportive of this concept of technology development. So when we've had really good years, and we've had some really good years, the hospital has often given us some of the royalty return to reinvest in new technologies. And that's been sort of the basis where we've started this technology development program that we have. And that's been around over 10 years. We also get a small share of the royalty distribution every year. So we have a little bit of evergreen, which helps a lot too. And then the hospitals recently put another fund together for us to do sort of a deeper investment in a few technologies. So they've been really, really generous. So I have to say it's a really fortunate place to work. And I know not every institution has access to those kind of funds. But even with Children's generosity, the money doesn't go very far. Product development and therapeutics is wildly expensive, right? And so what we've done is we've built up a lot of outside partnerships, strategic partnerships with pharma, biopharma, venture, where we have what I think of as, we call them strategic alliances, but they're really co-development agreements. And so we have brought in over $100 million worth of opportunity through these partnerships. So we have a longstanding partnership with Pfizer CTI, for example. We have a deal with Deerfield. They have about 20 partnerships out there now, with Autobahn Labs, a few unique ones with Elevate Bio, with Beam Therapeutics. And so these co-development partnerships are I think they're really interesting. They all take the structure of a master sponsored research agreement with some level of pre-negotiated license terms. But what they really do is they risk share on the front end, right? So they have a big sponsored research component. So the company is funding that technology development and that de-risking. And then they have some form of upside sharing on the back end. So sometimes it's the patent royalties, so that's pretty easy and straightforward. But they also will often share. In fact, we only do deals in which the parties agree to share in the upside of what comes out of that partnership, independent of patent ownership. So if you take sort of the most basic example, like say your investigator has a new target, the company identifies the drug. Maybe that will be co-owned technology, but maybe the compound will only be owned by the company. But in these frameworks, they agree to share the upside of the sale of that product that's identified through the partnership. So it's both cost sharing and then so risk sharing on the front end and upside sharing on the back end. So combined with our internal funds. So if you think about the scale, Children's has invested, has put about, we haven't spent it all, but all in about 20 million in technology development activities. But through these partnerships, we have access to over 100 million. I mean, it's not that they wrote us a check, right? But that's the scale of the opportunity. So you really need both, unless you're a very, very well-funded office. And I think maybe Wharf is the only one.
There are very few of those. But the model that you just described, where, it is a partnership and a mutual beneficial one in terms of, it really doesn't matter who owns the patent. It is a collaborative relationship. And so I think sometimes those tend to work out versus, filing early on a technology, and either you run into Section 101 issues or you can't get the breadth of claims that you want because of written description and enablement. And then, you're not going to get the license revenue because the patents don't cover that technology. This just seems like a much better kind of scenario than that type of situation that I just described.
Yeah, no. And, and these partnerships have a lot of other benefits because, these are pharma companies or venture companies. So they do have a very critical eye, right? So they are very picky about what they fund, but what they fund really passes the diligence. And so that's great. And they wind up providing a lot of feedback and education for our faculty, even when they don't fund the project, but especially when they do fund the project. So, for example, we have an investigator who received funding under one of these partnerships. And this is someone who's a brilliant scientist, but a complete basic scientist. I don't think has ever thought about industry before he entered into this partnership. But the party on the other side formed a research team, and he had his research team, and they collaborated throughout the life of this project. And I think it was really transformative for how this scientist thinks about his work and thinks about his trainees and their careers, and thinks about the impact of basic science. And I think sometimes those secondary benefits are also really valuable to the academic institution, even if you can't count them in dollars and cents, but in terms of helping our faculty really learn how to translate their technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And Irene, we've been focusing and talking a lot about commercialization, but I also want to talk about social impact, because technology transfer isn't just about commercialization, but how we can drive social impact. So can you talk about how you balance the pursuit of financial success with the mission of advancing healthcare and improving patient outcomes?
Yeah. We are a pediatric hospital, Boston Children's Hospital. And so social impact and patient care is top of mind all the time for us. And there are many examples where particularly in drug development and therapeutics, where if you do get a product to the market, there is a social benefit. There's a new treatment out there to help patients, and we have a lot of examples of that. I can talk about if you're interested. And that is also when we make money, right? If a product is sold, a royalty comes back. And so in that case, I feel like the social impact and the revenue generation kind of go hand in hand. But we also have a lot of examples at Boston Children's where that's not the case. So particularly if you think about pediatric medical devices, this is an area that's very challenging for us because there is not a real market pull in pediatric medical devices. However, there's a tremendous medical need. So with the various internal funds that we have, we do fund a lot of pediatric medical devices, even if we're not confident that there will be a commercial partner at the other end, but we're pretty confident it will change patient care. And the way I sort of think about it and explain it sometimes to the hospital leadership who want to know what we're doing with their money is that if we develop a device for pediatric cardiac surgery, say, even if there's not, and there's one that we're funding that, if it works, will reduce the number of times a child will need surgery. So the challenge with pediatric cardiac surgery and devices is that, of course, the child grows, right? If the child's healthy, the child's going to grow and eventually outgrow the device, and they will need many, many surgeries. And so we have a couple of very clever, brilliant pediatric cardiac surgeons. Of course, they're clever and brilliant.
Of course.
Innovative too, who've made devices that can grow with the child. They can't grow all the way from infant to adult, but it reduces the number of surgeries. And so the way we think about that is if we're successful at getting this product made, getting it through regulatory approval, then, Children's may become a center of excellence for that kind of surgery. Because if you're a parent and you think, well, if I go to Boston Children's, maybe my kid will need fewer surgeries, you're going to get on a plane or drive a few hours, right?
Absolutely.
So we think a lot about how to advance pediatric medical devices because we can't rely on the market. It's just the pull isn't there.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. And I hope it does work out because for every parent's worst nightmare is for their child to have surgery, let alone cardiac surgery, and then to be facing multiple cardiac surgeries. So yeah, that would be a huge social impact, assuming it, ultimately becomes a product.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that one is that we did fund the development of the project, and then the faculty member was able to get a matching gift. And so sometimes our funds lead to other kinds of funding too. I mean, we talk a lot about commercialization, but sometimes these early funds lead to gifts or matching funds from a foundation, and that we always consider that a win.
That's great. Well, I want to turn to the dark side and talk about the valley of death. We've kind of skirted around it a little bit as we've been talking here. And, that's a common struggle for almost every tech transfer office. And I'm sure that's been a struggle you've encountered throughout your career as well. So can you share with us some of the best practices and innovative approaches that you and your team at Boston Children's have implemented to help build meaningful IP and successfully bring these technologies to market?
Yeah. So, this is near and dear to my heart, and thinking about how to be successful in technology commercialization and how to help our faculty really, as I said, see their technologies make it out to have that broad impact through the commercial realm. And the ways we've done it have been through our internal funding mechanisms. We've done a lot with that through our external partnerships as well. But the other thing that we're thinking about a lot now, and we're sort of launching what we're calling a therapeutic accelerator at Children's, which is sort of an overarching program to cover our internal funding mechanisms, our external partnerships. But then what I think of as the third pillar is really, I think of it as community. So in the Boston area, there are a lot of resources for helping faculty advance their projects, whether they're resources that are sister institutions within that academic realm, whether they're incubators within town, whether they're like, some of the Lab Central incubators. Our pharma friends have different kinds of incubators, and different companies that have sort of been set up to support early stage development. And so what we want to do is, in addition to the pieces I've talked about a bit, is really build up I think of it as our community. Really, how do we make sure that the resources that exist in the community are available and accessible to our faculty, so we can really expand our reach and what we can offer to faculty, even if it can't come out of Boston Children's. And we don't want to, remake or build everything ourselves, right? That doesn't, it's not an efficient way to do it. And so that's the sort of third part that I think about a lot, is how to build those relationships. Now, in the Boston area, we're very fortunate because there are so many resources, and that's not true in every part of the country, obviously, or in every community. But there is a lot available, even, to folks who aren't located in Boston. And so that's sort of the third pillar of the stool that we think about.
Now, biotech is constantly and rapidly evolving. So I'm curious, Irene, how do you stay ahead of emerging trends and ensure that Boston Children's remains at the forefront of tech transfer as well as spinning out innovations?
Yeah. To a large extent, we rely on our faculty innovators to be at the cutting edge, and generally they really are. A lot of the the technologies that we work with, come up from the faculty, and so we rely on them. And then, within the Boston area, we have a pretty tight tech transfer community, and we share a lot of best practices, and we communicate a lot. I am a big believer in Autumn and sending people to Autumn to learn best practices from others, and especially outside of the Boston area, because, we think we know everything. We really don't. Right.
People in other parts of the country might disagree with you, but there you go. It's a friendly debate.
Exactly. And so it's an interesting time in the world, but in the biotech especially. I feel, we're coming out of the pandemic. I don't think we're quite in our new normal yet. I mean, I know we're in a new place. Thank God. We're not like, all home full time. But the community in Boston and among the tech transfer offices, and even with our own faculty, hasn't fully come back to the level of sort of energy and face-to-face that we used to have. And so I think there are a lot of questions about how we're all gonna move forward. And as a community, we relied so much on running into one another and seeing one another and being together. And it's sort of a maybe a bigger question, but thinking about how, for my team at Boston Children's, how do they really stay connected and really continue to be successful in spinning things out? So, as an example, we used to have, I would say, about 6 times a year, we would go to Kendall Square, which is about 2 miles from where Children's is located, and we would have an event. It might be, from 4 to 7, we'd have beer and wine and a couple of speakers, and we'd invite everybody we knew, and 50, 100 people from industry would show up. They were all in Kendall Square. It was on their way home. They'd stop, they'd have a glass of wine and, some cheese and meet some new people. A lot of our business development and relationships came from these kinds of events, and everybody held them, not just us. So there was constant interaction. It's not that the scientists aren't back, but it's the business development people aren't all back. And I don't know how things are going to continue to evolve, because I don't feel like we've quite found the next. I almost think of it like etiquette, like a social understanding. The etiquette used to be you always show up in person no matter what, even if it's crazy to show up in person, you show up in person, right? And then of course we all stopped doing that. And now we're back, but we're not fully back. And so I think it's an open question on how all of us are going to really stay as productive as we've been. And what's interesting, so my office, I've I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I've pushed really hard to get people back in the office, and everybody comes in, almost everybody, the same 2 days of the week, and it's worked really beautifully. We have a really nice community of people. The young people laugh, they have lunch together, they go out and get drinks. I love it, right? It warms my heart to hear them laughing and building relationships with one another. And from a purely somewhat selfish point of view, I also feel like, well, if they like coming to work and they have friends and a community, maybe they'll stay a little bit longer, right? It's hard to retain people, and maybe it'll be a little stickier for them, and they'll stick around a little bit longer. But what we haven't fully rebuilt is our connection with the faculty and our connections across the institution and across the community. And so that's sort of on my mind for the upcoming year, to think about how do we really get, we've got the team back, which is beautiful, but how do we get the team connected back both within the hospital and within the larger biotech community? I think that's, a question for everybody that we all are going to have to address.
I think that's a very legitimate question. I've heard that from other individuals and other tech transfers as well. The group and the team is back, and they're doing things as a unit, but reestablishing that connection with the PIs and researchers has, as you alluded to, and as you've seen, been very difficult to do. And how do you do that in this kind of new way of working? So I think that's a really good topic for the autumn annual meeting to talk about, because I think everybody is facing that same issue.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Irene, before we wrap up, I wanted to see if you wanted to share any success stories or examples of academic institutions that have established their own internal drug development incubators.
Yeah, I have a few I can talk about. One of the success stories there are sort of two that we're really excited about at Boston Children's. One is there's a vaccine technology that came out of our infectious disease department. It's a platform for vaccines. It was spun out. We funded it a couple of times in its early days through our internal development fund, and it spun out into a new co. They were funded initially by the Gates Foundation, which is really exciting. It was the first venture investment that the Gates Foundation made, and they've been developing a pneumococcal vaccine. It's a multivalent. It's a platform for multivalent vaccines. And last summer, they were acquired by GSK.
Awesome.
We're super excited about that because GSK is an amazing partner for vaccines. It's a real validation of the technology and the investigator and the work that he and his team have done. And it was a nice exit for Boston Children's Hospital as well, because we did have equity. And we're really excited about that. And we're working now on really building out our relationship with GSK, sort of a great opportunity to build that. And the other one that we're really excited about that's on the cusp that not everybody knows comes from Boston Children's is a CRISPR drug to treat sickle cell. It was developed by CRISPR Therapeutics in combination with Biotechs, and it comes from one of our investigators who had the insight that you could disinhibit fetal hemoglobin in sickle cell patients, and their fetal hemoglobin isn't sickled, where their adult hemoglobin is sickled. And the way the hemoglobin molecule forms, you don't need a lot of the healthy kind to form these healthy tetramers and to sort of overcome the problems with the disease. And so they figured out a way to use CRISPR, a CRISPR guide sequence, to affect this. And as I said, we licensed it to CRISPR Therapeutics, and they did a deal with Vertex, and it's in front of the FDA for approval now. And if it's approved, it's going to be the first CRISPR therapeutic on the market, and they think it'll be approved in December. Congratulations.
That's fantastic. And, there aren't really good treatments for sickle cell, so that's fantastic.
No, there are a lot of folks working on it, but I think these guys are going to be at the head of the pack. And I guess, if you look at examples of folks who, institutions that have really great programs, if people want to look at to model, I think you have to look at the Harvard Medical School. They have a Blavatnik Therapeutics program, a very impressive program where they have a number of medicinal chemists who will work. They're set up as a core, and they'll work for any of the Harvard-affiliated teaching hospitals. They also have a physical incubator for NUCOs at Harvard Medical School, but open to the affiliated hospitals. And they also have a grants program that's been really effective. So they've done a lot of really interesting work. also on the educational side. I mentioned WARF. WARF also has a really interesting therapeutic accelerator, and I've talked to those folks a couple of times. Really nice program. I haven't checked in a while, so I don't know exactly how it's going, but they were really helpful when we were beginning to set up our program. Mass General Brigham, it does not have a physical incubator, but they have an internal venture fund and have a really significant gap fund. And so they have a lot of activity. And then to jump over to the West Coast, you can't skip Stanford and their Spark program, which is really a really great model as well.
Well, thank you very much for sharing those. That truly is fascinating. Again, congratulations on the sickle cell drug. Fingers crossed that it gets through FDA quickly here. But Irene, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights and success stories with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Well, that concludes another episode of Autumn on the Air. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and special thanks to our guest, Irene Abrams, for sharing her experience and expertise with us.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at AUTM.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.
New to tech transfer or a seasoned pro? Autumn is the global member organization for tech transfer and is here to help you get connected, get smart, and get ahead. Whether you work in academia, research, government, business development, corporate engagement, or startups, Autumn is dedicated to supporting you through education, advocacy, networking, and promotion. Join and you'll receive 20 free live webinars, as well as meaningful discounts on meetings and courses, insider access to a vast network of colleagues to help you through challenges, and align on new technologies and the university decision makers who license them. Membership is open for 2023. Join us.